Good morning to one and all gathered here. It's a great pleasure indeed to be with you on this nice occasion to deliver the welcome address. As we all know that there is a need to sensitize and create awareness about gender justice and rights among academic and non-academic community in the educational institution. Therefore, our institution has made an opportunity to welcome you all for this gender sensitization program. Now I take a privilege to welcome the chief guest of today's function, Mrs. Shinda Singh and Mr. Karan Singh Chauhan. Now, Mr. Singha Singh, she is a faculty at School of Christ University, Bangalore. She secured gold medal for being a batch topper and in specialization paper on constitutional law. To add a feather to the cap, she also mastered in n number of additional courses. She also present numerous papers and also an editor to several journals. Ma'am is also a faculty advisor for for Women and Law and the Center for Tribal Rights at National Law University. We welcome you, ma'am. Next, I welcome Mr. Karan Singh Chauhan, also a faculty of Christ College, Bangalore. He is pursuing his PhD at National Law School, India University. He has numerous publications on legal development in business and constitutional law. Also, n number of workshops he has attended. He also organizes some FDP programs and mocks on gender and sexual diversity and inclusion in workplace at the University of Pittsburgh. We welcome you, ma'am, and welcome you, sir. Now I hand over the session to the presenters of today's function. Thank you.
All right. So, good morning, everyone. We are here to talk about gender equality and women's rights as a part of your gender sensitization program. Unusual times demand for unusual measures, and that is why we are here engaging with you online instead of actually sitting across the table. Also, let me take this opportunity to thank the entire medical fraternity, which includes all of you, for doing such an incredible job in these challenging times. May God bless you and your family with good health and happiness. With this, I would like to get back to the discussion. And before we actually begin the discussion, I wanted quickly to get a sense of what we collectively feel about the topic. So there are two questions that we have for you. And these questions will help us establish the relevance of the topic and also to justify why we are actually here. So can I request my friend to, yes, so you could do either log on to menti.com and feed the code to answer the question. There are two separate questions. The first one is, have you ever participated or contributed to gender discrimination to the best of your knowledge? The second question is, what thought or word or expression comes to your mind when you think of position of women in our Indian society? So please, I would encourage everybody to participate. One is an objective kind of question. You just need to answer in a form of a yes, no, or maybe. The other is where you would feed in your thoughts in terms of few expressions, any thought that comes to your mind when we talk about position of women in Indian society. All right. While you are at it, let us take a moment to appreciate the expression gender equality, which comprises two heavy-duty expressions, gender and equality. Now, as we know, equality is an abstract concept, and we have come to understand that when we say the expression equality, we mean likes to be treated alike and unlikes to be not treated alike. But the problem here is, how do we understand if objects, events, things, or persons are unlike? It is very easy, and what we most often end up doing is to infer the differences we perceive physically using our senses to group one people collectively or things, objects into one group and leave out the rest. So we end up sometimes getting confused when things get a little complicated and end up having difference of opinion, which blurs the line between likes and unlikes. The treatment to the concept of gender and sex is no exception. And let me tell you, in our society, this is a difference of convenience. So whenever it is suitable for us to, take recourse to the concept of sex, we do it. Whenever it is convenient for us to refer to or justify a particular conduct or expression using the expression gender, we go ahead do it. Whenever we are talking about the differences between male and females, again, this difference is a difference of convenience. And we are going to kind of illustrate this expression using numerous examples throughout the session by giving examples of certain judicial pronouncements or maybe legislative initiatives and other things that you come across in day-to-day life. So let's begin with this understanding of what is the difference between sex and gender. Meanwhile, Karan, can you please tell me what is the status of people participating in the two questions? Can we?
Yeah, ma'am, sure. I think for first question, people have answered. So I'll just show it. So this is the result for the first question.
All right, this is really great because I wasn't expecting such an honest answer. So we have majority of the population agreeing that you have kind of, or some people, because they probably do not know the difference, acknowledging that they have consciously or unconsciously participated in gender discrimination. All those who have opted for no, I would request you to kind of bear with us till we reach the end of the discussion. And I will demonstrate that, we all have in some way or the other participated in this kind of discrimination. Anyway, so let's get back to the difference between the two concepts, and I'll wait for a few others to participate. I would request everybody who's joining to please attend to these questions. The details of the same have been posted on the chat box, right? So please log on to menti.com and either feed the code or just use the link. It'll be simpler. Anyway, so let's get back to the concept and the difference between the concepts of gender and sex. Gender is a social construct. It is different from sex, which is understood on the basis of biological differences between man and woman. We've all grown up with an acquired notion or understanding of what and how should a man or a woman be like. We carry that baggage of our respective societies and all our lives, actually, till the time we consciously choose to evolve with the continuous exposure that you may have in terms of interacting with other students on All India platform, maybe interacting with your peers, or this is also an opportunity to increase your emotional intelligence and get sensitive to the needs of others, and effectively contribute to the greater society that we are all collectively a part of. So this is the exercise. This session is today that we are conducting for you is an attempt to help you do the same. All right, so as I said some time back, I asked you to address these two questions, and going back to the first question and the response that I got, majority of you did acknowledge, and there was a small minority which believed that they have not, in any way participated, either participated or contributed to gender discrimination. Okay, and I said sometime after that, I will, maybe request you to kind of go over the question again, because trust me, we have all contributed to gender discrimination. We have done it when we have been okay with different in times or curfew times for boys and girls in residential universities. When we have called a man a Casanova or dude when found hanging with 3 or 4 girls, but slut shamed a woman when found to do the same. We've indulged in it when we have checked or judged a woman on the basis of length of her skirt, but turned a blind eye to shorts or boxers which men so freely walk around. We have done it when we have let a disciplinary issue involving men's slides, stating that they are men, they won't listen anyway. but taken matters seriously when it comes to girls and girls hostel. We have participated when we have not insisted on our mothers sharing the table to eat meals with us. Instead, let us serve us fresh, hot food, leaving her to take the food in the end. We have done it when we have sung songs like "Kab tak रूठेगी, चीखेगी, चिल्लाएगी, दिल कहता है एक दिन हसीना मान जाएगी." And the list is endless. You know, you do not understand the repercussions of few actions, few expressions that you use in day-to-day life, the way you behave. But imagine the kind of impact that it has on people, on you, first of all, when you go on singing a song like that. And I know it's not your mistake. This is what is available in our society, which is why I go on emphasizing the fact that it is no individual person's mistake. And it is the responsibility that needs to has to be borne by the society at large. We are society and society is us. What we learn in our private sphere is what we give out in public sphere, and hence acknowledgement of the problem to begin with is absolutely essential. We are all products of patriarchal society, but a change will begin when we first admit that there is a problem, and second, to discuss and try and figure out what can be done about it. And therefore, the second question, in terms of what is the position, what in your opinion is comes to your mind, or what is your opinion in terms of what is the position of women in our society? So, can I again request my friend to share the result of the second question? Can we go back to the last slide, please?
Yes, ma'am.
And so, can you please share the Mentimeter result?
Yeah, is it visible?
No, so we still have the slide on.
Okay.
All right. Excellent. And this is exactly what I was talking about. So I see not many have participated. How many have participated?
Only 4 people.
Okay, so I would request everybody, there are around 57 participants, request you to please log on to menti.com or use the code or just use the link.
I think in the end we will come back to it and we'll just check it.
Maybe we'll do that. Yes. So this is exactly what I was talking about when when I ask you a question like this, what thought, word, expression comes to your mind when you hear the expression position of women in Indian society, and people kind of come up with expressions is housework. And it's very encouraging to find out that people think that the position is quite better these days. It is encouraging those who encourage us. You've been brought up well, but those who are of the opinion that their position is in the housework, there is a problem, and I think you need to reflect on the kind of the lessons that you are taking from everything that is around you, because it's a serious problem. We don't understand the casual statements and the ideas that we have in our head, this entire notion, and I am completely for it. I understand the whole concept of division of labor. I know all of you are medical students, but you're catering to one kind of segment of medical expertise, that is dental. And I completely understand that there has to be a division of labor, but the problem is, if there is a division of labor, and and it is in the interest of the society, but when you're looking at the interest of the society and compromising with the interest of one section of it, that is where the problem begins, right? People, you are associating housework with women because men do not choose to share the burden. And that is exactly, when I was referring to the difference between sex and gender, I was not saying that, the two terms are completely unrelated, but undue consideration of the limitations of strength, whichever way you take it, of the former over the latter is problematic. And to illustrate the problem, I'll give you an example. So the nature of the biology, makes a difference between a man's body and a woman's body only on account of the fact that a woman can give birth to a child. But there is a difference between bringing up a particular child, maybe breastfeeding a particular child for a certain number of years, taking care of the child, and doing the housework. I fail to understand that what is the relation between bringing up a child for a certain year when your body requires you to in terms of maybe breastfeeding. So the nature requires you to breastfeed the child for some time, right? After that, it is the obligation that is placed on the society, right? And that is an undue, obligation that is placed on women in our society. Where have we written the rule that men cannot take care of children? Is it more my kids than yours? Who has established this principle? How is the responsibility of raising a particular child primary responsibility of mothers? Why do women have to give up on the job, compromise in terms of promotion, take a break in the career, more than what is necessarily required in terms of the obligation that is placed by nature? So maybe for first, and you're medical students, so first few years, maybe if we are to be on non-conservative side, suppose one person is, breastfeeding a particular child for 4 years. But what after that? Right? How is it that you associate the position of women with respect to or in association with household work? And if you do that, because the sex does not require you to do, it is the gender, the concept of gender, because it is through the process of socialization that society has told you that, you are to choose blue and women are to choose pink. You are to play rough and women are supposed to play soft. You're supposed to laugh freely. It's okay to smoke and drink in public, but it is not when a woman laughs. Eyebrows raise, and when you see a woman smoking on the side of the street, she's considered somebody, having loose character. And the example that I gave, when you see a man hanging out with 4 or 5 women, he's considered to be Dude, Casanova, the most sought after guy. And these are the examples that you see in your day-to-day life. And you may not see the relation now, but the thing is that the approach is problematic. That you feel that there are certain things permissible and harmless if you go on controlling the life of one half of the population, where you give absolute sense of entitlement to the other half. So any society cannot progress if the compromise has to happen only on behalf of or only on the side of one half of the population, right? So the next question is, how do we address it, right? And there are various means, and one of the ways we are addressing is to at least initiate the discussion through such kind of forum. And I congratulate the college for actually thinking of a topic to take, thinking of an initiative to kind of address and to make an attempt to sensitize the general mass. But one of the other popular tools or methods used by our founding fathers was to use to resolve this particular issue by using law as a tool of social engineering for guaranteeing fundamental rights to equality to both men and women, and by making provisions for affirmative action or positive discrimination in favor of women. We all have read a little about the Constitution in the history course. So today, if I ask you, have you heard, the name of the philosopher Aristotle? I think most of you will be familiar with his name. And he's arguably one of the most influential Greek philosophers in the development of Western Eurasian civilization. And he initially, and having regard to the time, his idea was the relation of male to female is by nature a relation of superior to inferior and ruler to ruled. And we have come from that position. And if you look at the scriptures of ancient India, women were treated, or at least they had that divine kind of standing. They were treated as deity. And we have come to, again, the next phase in life where this kind of relation is established by Western philosophers who are the society which is considered to be more advanced than our own society. And next, I've also given examples of, the expressions of, I don't know that I can call them feminist, because the understanding of the expression is not quite clear. So I've used 3 kind of most powerful quotes that I came across in relation to the women's rights. And it is, women will only have true equality when men share with them the responsibility of bringing up the next generation. And you must be familiar with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She is one of the, she passed recently in this month in 2020, one of the most promising, one of the most, somebody who has very progressive approach in the US Supreme Court. There will be never a generation of great men until there has been a generation of free women or free mothers. Again, a very powerful quote, and gender equality must become lived reality. And that is exactly what we are attempting to do. I have few recommendations for you, all those who are not very familiar with the way rights of the women have evolved over years. So it's a very good documentary. She's beautiful when she's angry. It kind of traces the history of women. Movement focuses on the personal stories of a number of second wave feminists as they contend gender political questions of mid 20th century. And this is very helpful in understanding and tracing the impact that it possibly had in India also. So if you draw a parallel, which was late, the impact was felt quite late, and the starting of the watershed period may be the Constitution of India. Again, another important movie which I feel everybody could use is Salt of the Earth. It's a 2004 movie. This is a 1954 movie. It's a must watch because in a different context, in a different civilization, how, by using simple techniques, women have tried to establish their rights within the existing system is beautifully portrayed in this particular, and now it has attained the status of a classic. So now I was talking about the, how Constitution has kind of provided, served as a watershed moment in our context, in the Indian context. And the relevance, and we have read a little bit of Constitution through our course, just to kind of put things or the relevance of the Constitution in context. Let me make an example of how things have changed with the advent of Constitution and intervention of judiciary. Sometimes, though a little late, but a welcome change nevertheless. So if you look at section 497 of IPC, that is the Indian Penal Code, that is the substantive law on crimes committed in India. It is a pre-constitutional law. It was enacted in 1860. And at that point, women had no rights independent of their husbands and were treated as chattel or property of their husbands. There is an offense that you must be familiar with, and that is offense of adultery. And that was treated as an injury to the husband because it was considered as a theft of his property, for which he could proceed to prosecute the offender. But in order to establish that particular offense, the requirements were that, there has to be a sexual intercourse between a married man and a married woman and a man who is not her husband. The man should have sexual intercourse with a married woman, must know or has reason to believe that she is the wife of another man. And such sexual intercourse must take place with her consent, otherwise it would amount to rape. And sexual intercourse that so happened with a married woman must take place without the consent of the husband. So it is okay if the husband consents, and when the husband consents, it's no longer offense. So historically, adultery interfered with the husband's exclusive entitlements, and it is considered as the highest possible invasion of property, similar to theft, as I said. And when you look at the section of 497, given the essentials that were required to kind of establish the crime, women may be treated as subordinate to men in as much as it provided that, when there is a connivance and consent of the man, there is no offense. It treats women as a property. It treats us as somebody who is totally subservient to the will of the master. And it is a reflection of truly social dominance that was prevalent when the penal provision was drafted. It took a very, very long time for India to kind of realize the principles that were there under the Indian Constitution. And recently in 2018, section 497 has been read down, has been declared to be unconstitutional by the Supreme, the highest court of the land, Supreme Court of India. And it stated that it treats men and women unequally, as women were not subject to prosecution of adultery, and women could not prosecute their husband for adultery. All right, it was only man against man. And that was in relation to the right entitlement they have over women. And I already referred to the whole concept of consent, and I referred to the concept of likes and unlikes, and this section lacks an adequate determining principle to criminalize consensual sexual activity and was considered to be arbitrary and therefore violative of Article 14. So, as I said, under the Indian Constitution, the general equality principle is being taken care of by Article 14, which talks about equality before law for everybody and inclusive of women. There are certain specific grounds on which you cannot discriminate, and that is provided under Article 15(1). That includes even sex. Equality of opportunity for all citizens in matters relating to employment or appointment to any office is taken care of under Article 16. And you have, other than fundamental rights being guaranteed, there is also a provision of 15 clause 3, which provides or gives the right to the state to make laws that may be discriminatory, but positively discriminates in favor of women. The state has an obligation under directive principles of state policy for securing men and women equally the rights of an adequate means of livelihood under Article 39A, and equal pay for equal work is taken care of under Article 39D. Again, other kinds of rights in terms of level of nutrition, etc., standard of living, other various provisions are also there. I'm not going into it, but there is also a fundamental duty which is placed on us to promote harmony and the spirit of common brotherhood among all the people of India, to renounce practices derogatory to the dignity of the woman. So it's not only contained in fundamental rights, it's not only contained under directive principles of state policy, but it's also a fundamental duty for us to kind of ensure that we treat both the sections of the Indian population equally, right? And we see a lot of crimes, and all these crimes are nothing but manifestations of unequal position of men and women, a sense of entitlement that men have, a sense of subordination that women have, a sense that women could not consent to a lot of things, and women cannot say no. And there are various examples of this particular idea, and therefore I personally highly recommend India's Daughter, which relates to the Nirbhaya gang rape, or Jyoti Singh's case, gang rape of 2002. It was banned initially, but now it is available. To kind of look into, and the reason why I've recommended it is because there are different stakeholders, including the lawyers and the opinion that is expressed, or even the persons who were prosecuted for the crime, the ones who actually were the perpetrators who committed the crime, and the notion as to why it happened, right? That is very important for you to understand the connection between society and law. And it is not sufficient that we have law in place unless we change our mentality, we become sensitive to the cause. Only then can a change be initiated. So there are other legal frameworks that have a bearing on this particular issue, and I request my friend Karan to take over and discuss the laws that are in place in India for the protection of women's rights. Karan, can you please take over?
There's some technical issue. Okay, am I audible now?
Yes, yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay, thank you. I think there's some technical issue I'm facing. So sorry about that. I think I'll just turn off my video, maybe that might help. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I would like to thank the organizers and also Snigdha that she is here with us. Yeah, every day we see that, even if you open the news, a newspaper, or if you open a media channel also, you will find that there is a violence which is going on against the woman, against a particular gender in the society, right? And this is, as rightly mentioned by Snigdha also, that this violence and discrimination is multi-layered in the society. So at every level, you will find that women,
So there is a
they
voice lag.
are discriminated,
There's a
or there is
problem.
some sort of
Excuse me.
violence going on against them. And that's why, if you look at the report prepared by the UNDP, uh, ma'am, is it okay now? Or,
It's okay. It's okay now. Your voice is audible.
okay. Okay, right. So there's a multi-layered discrimination, and that's why the ranking of India when it comes to gender inequality is at the lowest rung when it comes to the international stage. We are ranked at 125, right, when it comes to gender inequality. And that's why I have divided this inequalities, this discrimination, this violences into different parts. So that's what I will be dealing with. I will be giving you a brief idea as to the legal framework when it comes to protection and the transformation of a one particular gender, which is women, and their rights, right? So first I will be looking at the socio-economic issues, then cultural issues, and then last one will be the sexual issues, right? Yes. So when I talk about socio-economic issue, it is mostly dealing with the status of women when it comes to their social status, when it comes to their economic status, right? And historically, it has been found, especially in India, and not just in India, all across the world, also even in European countries as well, that women have been treated very poorly. Their status in society was always, at a lower rung, and our Indian Constitution, in a way, tried to resolve that. And similarly, to successfully implement the idea of the Constitution, which is to implement right to equality, legislation, okay, the legislation of India has also come up with several laws for the protection of the rights of a woman. So one of that law is the Hindu Succession Act. Okay, Hindu Succession Act. What it does is it provides a similar status to a woman when it comes to the succession of property rights. Okay, uh, earlier what used to happen was, earlier only son, they used to get this succession right over the property of their ancestral property or property of their father, etc. But nowadays, even a woman, even a girl, she also has full and equal rights as a son, right? Similar to that, there is also a maintenance provision. So maintenance when it comes to wife, when it to children or a girl child, etc. So there are special provisions for their maintenance as well, right? So under section 125 of CRPC, if any woman is there, including wife, including parent, including a girl child, they can ask for a maintenance to the court, and they can ask their husband or their father, etc., to provide for a maintenance in case if they are unable to maintain themselves, right? Similarly to that, there's a, you can say, a right which is endowed upon a woman, that they should be maintained by the, you can say, the male person or the leading person in the family, in case if they are unable to maintain themselves. And it is provided apart from section 125 of CRPC. It is provided in Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act of 1957. You can find the sections 18, 19, 20 for that particular purpose. Right. Now coming to the next thing, which is again, it is as much as a sexual type of violence, or violence, or a criminal violence, you can say, against women. And at the same time, it is also talking about the socio-economic, right? Now, what domestic violence is, I mean, I don't need to explain that particular thing. Domestic violence, we might have witnessed it everywhere. We might have witnessed it, maybe in our neighbor's home, maybe in our own home, okay, maybe at friends' home. So yeah, that is present in most of the homes. And I mean, there's also a report recently which said that due to COVID, the domestic violence has been increasing. Okay, so it is at an all-time high. Okay, recently, if you compare it with the data of 10 years, it is at an all-time high currently. So it is an ongoing issue right now also because of this lockdown, and they are forced home, and that provides this opportunity for the male member, for their husband, etc., to commit this domestic violence against the woman. Now, to protect the woman's right when it comes to domestic violence, there are certain laws to ensure that this domestic violence is, first of all, it can be eradicated, although that's not happening, but still, these laws are there for their protection. So one of the law is the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005. So what this act does is it provides certain rights and certain mechanisms to a woman when she's suffering from this domestic violence, right? So certain of the mechanisms that are provided are, first is protection order, residency order, monetary relief, and compensation order. So basically what it boils down is all these orders are basically if you are suffering from domestic violence. Now in domestic violence, it not just includes just a wife, it includes any woman who is in a domestic relationship. So it includes your daughter as well, because she is also in a domestic relationship with her father as well. Right. So any person who is in a domestic relationship, any woman, okay, they can take use of all this mechanism, which is your residence, basically, which says that you have to be provided a secure place to stay. If you have if you got any sort of injury, if injury which includes mental injury or even physical injury, then in that circumstance you can ask for a compensation, you can ask for a monetary relief, or you can ask for a protection from the court as well. Similarly to that, Section 498A, okay, Section 498A of Indian Penal Code, it criminalizes this domestic violence and any sort of cruelty against women. So if any person, okay, if any husband or relative, etc., if they are cruel towards their wife or their daughter, etc., then in that circumstance, a woman can file a case under 498A, and the punishment for that particular thing is up to 3 fine. Now, apart from domestic violence, apart from compensation, which is provided in Domestic Violence Act, apart from the maintenance, there are certain other, you can say, cultural or social issues which are faced by women, especially in the Indian society. So one of that issue is the dowry. Okay, there's a in most of the societies, in most of the caste, creed, even if you go across the religion also, dowry is an issue, and because of this dowry, there are a lot of violence committed against women. So to remove that particular practice, the legislation has come up with legislative authority has come up with certain acts, you can say. Okay, so one of that act is the Dowry Prohibition Act of 1961. What it does is it penalizes the giving or taking, or even any sort of contractual arrangement when it comes to dowry. So even if you are, soliciting dowry, that is criminalized. So you can be punished for that. So under Section 4, it provides that 6 months of imprisonment or less if you are demanding dowry, or in case if you are giving or taking dowry. So both things are there actually, not just taking, even if you are giving. So in that circumstance, the punishment rises up to 5 years. But there is one exception here. So if you're not demanding something, then if you're presenting any gift, etc., during a marriage, that is fine. But as long as it's not an unjustified demand, etc., coming from the boy's side, then it can be allowed. But if it's an unjustified demand coming from the boy's side or from the male side, then it can be punished up to for 5 years. Prohibition Act, there's a section in IPC itself which criminalizes the taking of dowry or any violence, any crime which happens, any death which happens because of this, dowry. It is provided under Section 304B IPC, and the punishment there is 7 years and up to life imprisonment. The next the next issue is the workplace equality. Now, when it comes to workplace equality, there is a lot of issues there as well. There is a discrimination faced by women when it comes to workplace equality, and there are a lot of legislations. Now, I won't be able to complete all the laws which are there for the protection of women, but most of the important laws I just wanted to briefly discuss with you. So one of the law is the Prohibition of Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act. So I think that Snigdha will be dealing with later onwards. But basically what this act does is it provides a protection to a woman when it comes to sexual harassment at workplace, right? So if you are getting harassed, if you are getting sexually harassed, then there is some sort of mechanism which is provided under this POSH Act. The next act which is there, which provides for the workplace equality, is the Maternity Benefit Act. Now, Maternity Benefit Act, what it does is it gives a certain, you can say, rights, maternity rights, you can say. And this maternity rights includes maternity leave up to 6 months. Earlier, it was 4 months. Before that, it was not even present. But now, it has been changed up to 6 months. And at the same time, a woman employee, she is entitled to maternity benefit in terms of salary as well, and even in terms of you can say the work allotment. The work allotment also has to be reduced if it is required so by the employer, taking into account the needs of a woman, right? Similar to the maternity benefit, there is another act which is the Equal Remuneration Act. So as Snigdha mentioned earlier, right, that the constitutional idea is that we should provide equality to all, but that is not happening, right? Especially at the workplace also. So sometimes for the same sort of work, a woman is not paid equally for the same work, and that has been observed throughout the industry, even in sometimes in government sector also, right? So for that purpose, there's another act which is passed by the parliament, which is the Equal Remuneration Act. And it provides this equal salary for equal work. So that's the whole idea behind this equal remuneration. Now coming up to the next theme, which is the cultural violence against women. Now cultural violence, it is similar to socioeconomic violence. It is based on the position of women, that how women are getting discriminated by the society every day. Right. And one of the issue when it comes to cultural violence is the female feticide. And you might be aware of that. It's because it's very much related to the medical field as well. Right. Female feticide. Every, more than 2 lakh girls under the age of 5 die each year in the country due to feticide. Okay. And that's a very problematic thing. And it actually, you can say, kind of creates an imbalance. Sex ratio, when it comes to sex ratio, it creates that imbalance, and that might have very disastrous impact on the society as a whole. And same thing can see in Haryana, right, where the sex ratio is so low that so many people, so many men, they are unmarried because of that. And if that happens, even sometimes crimes also increases. And there is a research which says that there is a relation rate of crime and in terms of sex ratio, right? So for that purpose, the government came up with certain laws to prevent female feticide, because in India, the son is the mostly loved by the family, by by the grandmother, whatever is the case, and it leads to lots of issues. So the government came up with certain laws. One of the law is the PCPNDT, basically preconception and prenatal diagnostic technique. Regulation and prevention of misuse. So what it does is it penalizes any medical professional, okay, if they divulge the gender, okay, the gender of the fetus, okay, if they divulge it, then the penalty is up to 3 years, and it also includes fine. Similar to that, there is also the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act 1971. This is also there to protect the woman and the woman's right. it also in a way limits this practice of abortion, because in India, if we allow abortion to go freely, then what will happen is there will be more female feticide. So for that purpose, what this act does is it provides a certain uh, justification. So any doctor, right, any medical professional, if they think that an abortion is necessary, right, allow that abortion till 12 to 20 weeks. So between that time or before that time, depending on the circumstance, depending on whether there's an injury, whether there's a threat to life or health of the mother, or whether the child which is supposed to be born, if there's an issue or there's some medical condition which is very much problematic, and it creates some sort of threat to the life of the woman, then in that circumstance the woman is allowed to terminate the pregnancy. But there's an exception to that rule also. So in circumstances where you say where the life of a woman is under an immediate threat, so in that circumstance, even after 20 week also, the termination of pregnancy is allowed, but that is a very limited circumstance, and it depends from case to case basis, right? So this was a special act for the this pregnancy. Coming to the next thing, section 312 of IPC, it again penalizes the termination of pregnancy, basically causing miscarriage. If you are doing that, if you are not a medical professional and if you are causing miscarriage, you will be liable for punishment up to 7 years and fine. Now, the next theme that I want to discuss with you, and which is very much relevant again when it comes to Indian society, is the sexual violence against women. Sexual violence, as I said before also, that even if you open any newspaper or even any media, right, you'll find that every day you'll find some sort of report of someone getting raped, someone getting sexually harassed, someone getting sexually assaulted, and this actually is a very big issue in India. I mean, you might have remembered this Delhi gang rape case also, and I think Snigdha also mentioned about one of the documentary which covers that particular case at a great detail. Now in India, after that particular case, there were a lot of changes when it came to criminal justice system. So what changes were there was an increase in punishment, right? So when it comes to rape, it is the punishment and the definition of rape is provided in IPC. So in IPC section 375 provides for the definition of rape. Now after this Delhi gang rape case, the definition of rape has been expanded. Now earlier what used to happen is, earlier only penovaginal penetration used to be considered as rape. Okay, so any other sort of penetration was not considered as rape. But after this criminal law amendment 2013, any sort of penetration by any object also, okay, that will be considered as rape, and even the punishment has been increased, right? So the punishment for rape is the 7 years to 10 years. Similarly to that, there's another addition after this criminal law amendment 2013 is the addition of 376 clause 2, which talks about aggravated rape. Now aggravated rape is what? Aggravated rape is basically when you are under, or if you are in a position of authority over a woman, and if you commit rape in that circumstance. So for example, a jailer, a doctor also, right, in a hospital, because a doctor is also they also have authority over a woman. A woman is vulnerable in those particular circumstances. So if they commit rape, okay, in a particular premise, let's say hospital or in a jail, etc., then in that circumstance the punishment is much higher. The punishment is up to 10 years, and it also goes up to the natural life of the accused person, right? Now similarly to that, for child rapes, right, there's another special law for that, which is provided in POCSO, basically to prevent this child sexual offenses. So there also, any child rape has much higher punishment actually. So it is provided in section 6, the punishment for sexual assault against a child, which includes a girl child also, right? And the punishment there is up to the natural life, or it also includes death in certain circumstances. So I think it is the only circumstance where in case of rape, your death can, a punishment of death can be awarded. Now, interestingly, in India, marital rape is not recognized. So if a husband is committing sexual violence, if a husband is involving himself in a sexual intercourse without the consent of his wife, that is not considered as rape because it is provided as an exception under 375, and it is a very shameful thing, according to me. In some Western countries now, this thing has been criminalized, and same thing should happen here, because a woman, she is not a property of a husband, she is not a property of any male person, and marriage is not just, it's not a license for you to commit sexual intercourse. But in India, that is not recognized. The only exception to that particular this particular exception is child marital rape. So in case of child marriage, right, in case of a child marriage, if a person, if the husband consummate that particular marriage, okay, or if he involves himself in a sexual intercourse, then in that circumstance, uh, he can be held liable for rape as well. But that doesn't mean that when a husband is doing that sort of activity, he can get scot free. This marital rape or forceful sexual intercourse, it is a ground for divorce as well. It is a ground for cruelty as well. So I actually cited this 498A, section 498A for cruelty. So you can actually use that section when it rape, but it won't be considered as rape, only cruelty. There are certain other sections also which sort of you can say criminalizes sexual violence, so including outraging the modesty of a woman, okay, sexual harassment anywhere, not just workplace, but any sort of sexual harassment is now criminalized, right? Similarly to that, there is section 354B, which is disrobing any woman with the intention to lower her dignity, etc. The punishment is actually much higher when it comes to disrobing a woman. It is up to 7 years. The next one is 354C, which is voyeurism. The punishment there is up to 3 years. Voyeurism includes all sort of, when someone is watching a woman while she is doing her private act, which can be anything. It can be, changing clothes. It can be whatever, sexual act, etc. So in that circumstance, if you are recording or if you are watching her, then in that circumstance you are committing a criminal act. The next one is 354D, which is stalking. So if you're stalking a woman, the punishment for that is up to 3 years. Right now, the stalking is not just physical stalking. Right, this stalking also includes your cyber stalking as well. So this basically leads to harassment of women. Right. So even if a person is stalking you in a cyber world, because nowadays we are more active in a cyber world. So in that circumstance, you can still be held liable. Apart from that, there are certain other laws as well. I won't be able to complete all the laws, all the provisions which are there to provide or to protect women's rights. But one of the important one I want to discuss a little bit, and then I'll give it over to Snigdha ma'am. So the next one is you have acid attack, right? Acid attack, it has, and I mean, you might be aware of it, and you might come across such cases also of acid attack against a woman, right? And after this criminal law amendment, 2013, this acid attack has been criminalized, and the punishment is very high in those circumstances. So it is provided in section 326A and 326B, where in case of an acid attack, the punishment is up to life, right? And I mean, this is a need of the hour as well, right? Harsher punishment, more protection, better mechanism, better implementation of all these laws is needed. But that particular thing is lacking. Although we have all the laws, we have all the protections available, although there are some more requirements, but at the same time, whatever we have available, it is very much hard to implement them, right? And you will find, or you will see that when you look at the statistics also, right, where the conviction rate when it comes to crimes against women is very low. Correct, right? So with this, I'm concluding this sexual intercourse or sexual violence, sorry, and I will hand it over to Snigdha on this issue of contemporary development, if she can hear me.
Actually, we have overshot the time. We had planned to discuss two other very important pieces of legislation, but then we'll be left with no time at all for question and answer. So I don't know. Should we kind of leave it at this and go for question and answer?
Yeah, I think it's already yeah 12:25. Yeah, we can go with question answers.
In case if you have any answer, any question regarding whatever we have discussed so far, we had planned on kind of discussing the sexual harassment at workplace. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it is very important act actually, and for a working woman especially, mechanisms which are available, protection which are available when it comes to sexual harassment is, the information regarding that is very much needed. And there is a very comprehensive rules and regulations for, when it comes to, sexual harassment at workplace. Snigdha ma'am, are you there?
Yes, just 1 second.
Yes.
All right. So, if there are any questions that you would want us to take with respect to whatever we have discussed so far, and if there are no questions, then maybe I'll briefly touch upon the concept of sexual harassment. Karan, could you please check in the chat box if there are questions for us? You could also unmute and ask your question if that is okay, because that will also give us a sense of how much you have absorbed over the last 1 hour. All right, since there is no more question and we have 4 minutes, I think I'll quickly kind of go over the legislative initiative in the form of sexual harassment at workplace, which is very, very important and relevant for all of us, including you. So sexual harassment basically constitutes a gross violation of women's right to equality and dignity. It has its roots in patriarchy, as we discussed, and the perception that men are superior to women, and that some form of violence against women are acceptable. And it creates a sort of insecure and hostile work environment. It's violative of Articles 14, 15, and 21, which we discussed earlier. And there is also obligation on the Indian government under convention. There are a number of international instruments which pose certain kind of obligation on the Indian government to bring about laws that are for the protection of women. That is CEDAW, Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. So the legislative measure which was taken was, recently in 2013, that is sexual harassment of women at workplace, prevention, prohibition, and redressal. So prior to that, the Supreme Court intervened in the matter because there was a legislative vacuum. There was no law in place for the protection of women against sexual harassment at workplace. And it was pursuant to a case that was filed by Bhanwari Devi in 1992, who was hired by state of Rajasthan to work for the interest of the children. And she tried to stop the child marriage of 1-year-old child. And in retaliation, men who did not agree to the kind of work and the ideas that she was floating and this particular incident, they gang raped her, and she had the courage, and because it was done in course of the employment, she sought certain, so a case was filed in the name of Vishakha in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court laid down detailed guidelines in terms of what constitutes sexual harassment and what is the obligation of the employer, who can be termed as employee. It is an interesting fact that 93% of women work in informal sector, right? And therefore, we have a particular legislation in the form of 2013 legislation, and rules also have been brought pursuant to 2013 legislation, which are sort of an extension of what has already been had already been laid down by the Supreme Court in Vishakha judgment. And on top of it, as Karan discussed, Criminal Law Amendment Act 2013 also kind of supplemented the various other crimes, right? So the objective was basically to ensure safe working spaces for women and to build an enabling work environment that would respect women's right to equality and status of opportunity. So whenever we are looking at legislation, there is a purpose with which a particular legislation is floated. and that is indicated in the preamble of the Act. And this is what the preamble of this particular Act stipulated. And it gave a very a wide meaning of the expression workplace. So, for example, somebody who is even using the transport provided by the employer to come to the place of employment, that also by necessary implication would amount to workplace, right? And the expression, the aggrieved person, though POSH is a very progressive kind of legislation, it's not gender neutral. And we are not maintaining that, sexual harassment cannot happen against men also. But POSH Act is not a gender neutral legislation, and it protects only the interest of women. So if you read section 3(1) read with section 2A, it provides a definition of who could be an aggrieved woman. It does not have the application in context of men. Who could be an employee. So even if you're a student and you're approaching a particular workplace, you need not work there on a permanent basis. So even if you're doing a work, or if you're an ad hoc employee, if you're doing work on temporary basis, if you're a trainee, if you're a student, if you're an intern, all will come within the purview of the expression employee. Lastly, it has a very, very expansive definition of what constitutes sexual harassment. It includes all sort of unwelcome sexually tinted behavior, whether directly or by implication, such as physical contact, advances, demand or request for sexual favors, making sexually colored remarks showing pornography, any other unwelcome physical, verbal, or non-verbal conduct of a sexual nature. And there are following circumstances which may amount to sexual harassment, which also on the same lines. We wanted to share a few examples of what kind of conduct would amount to sexual harassment. So for example, if you're insisting on that particular employee to stay back and do certain kind of paperwork which has a certain kind of sexual indication, any kind of unwanted sexual advances or proposition, pestering for dates, or receiving unwelcome sexual suggestions or invitations, offering employment benefits in exchange of sexual favors, displaying sexually suggestive objects or pictures, cartoons, calendars, or posters, making or using derogatory comments about a person's body, dress, or sexually suggestive jokes, being forcibly kissed or hugged, or having somebody expose their private parts to you, or repeatedly staring at a woman's body parts that make her uncomfortable. Ease teasing, making or threatening retaliation after a negative response to sexual advance, or report for threatening to report sexual harassment, all these would constitute, sexual harassment. The idea is not that, it has a very kind of sensitive approach. It has to be seen from the view, from the perspective of reasonable person. So any kind of, activity which is seen as harmless, flirting will not come within the definition of sexual harassment. But if it goes to the extent of making the other person uncomfortable, that would indeed amount to sexual harassment. So for this, there is a documentary in the Indian context, which has been produced by a Chennai-based filmmaker. And so I really highly recommend this particular documentary. So whenever you get time, please refer to this particular documentary. We also have the plan to discuss surrogacy, but I think we've really overshot. And this, if there are any questions, we are happy to entertain. But we would also take this opportunity, as like I said before, to thank all of you for extending this kind of warm welcome to the two of us, to give this for giving us this opportunity to interact with you. Because most often people do not make sense of why lawyers are advocating it, because we are always dealing with the rights approach, and it's always good to interact with people from different fraternity to kind of get a sense of where they are in terms of the rights-based issue. And if we could in any way kind of influence and bring about even the slightest change in your approach, which is progressive, we would consider ourselves lucky and fortunate. So if there's anything current that you would want to add, or if there are any other questions, we'll be happy to entertain. But with this, I would want to kind of rest my case. Thank you.
It will be an immense pleasure for me to deliver the vote of thanks. A big thank you to Ms. Sinha ma'am and Karan Singh sir. It was a really you have made a great efforts towards today's program and make us understand it's time that we all see gender as a spectrum instead of two sets of opposing ideals. You have really enlightened us with your inspirational speech and motivation and motivated us to women empowerment and legal measures. I must mention our deep sense of appreciation for your perfect knowledge sharing speech on gender equality and women's rights. I, on behalf of our institution, once again thank you for your mind-blowing program. Thank you, Singha ma'am and Karan sir. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. It was indeed a pleasure interacting with all of you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Now, for participants, I'm sharing the feedback link in the chat box. You can just send the feedback forms in this. Okay, thank you. Any queries from the participants? You just wanted to ask any queries?
Yeah, so just in case if you want to reach out to us later onwards, you can mail us as well.
Yes, that'll be absolutely fine. We'll be happy to entertain questions. So we could share our email IDs. They were already shared with the college. So in case you have any query, you want to reach out to us on any particular issue, even related areas, if you're facing any problems, you want any kind of help, we'll be happy to help you.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your wonderful help and support. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.